Welcome to a new episode of the Holistic Selling Podcast. Joining me today is Keno Helmi. Keno and I connected about a year ago, and we've stayed in touch ever since. Keno is a 6-time Chief Revenue Officer with over 18 years of leadership experience in the SaaS B2B space, overseeing teams at both startups and publicly traded software companies. Keno is a strategic visionary within the technology space with expertise in transforming and scaling go-to-market and sales organizations. He has a deep understanding of complex sales processes and has a successful track record of consistently growing revenues in very competitive and evolving marketplaces. Finally, as you will see today, Keno loves helping others by sharing his passion. So it is a pleasure to have him with us today on the call. Keno, welcome to the podcast. I'm sure you have a few more words to say to complete your introduction.
I don't know who that guy was that you just described, but I'd love to meet him sometime. The viewers should be able to see that between my graying hair and my receding hairline, that the expertise that I've come by in this field has been fostered by lots and lots and lots of mistakes, lots of pain and suffering. What you see is the shattered remnants of my former glory, but I'm happy to share a few lessons learned along the way.
I think you're way too modest. And every time you and I talked, I've learned a lot from you. So appreciate again you're sharing that with our audience today. I'd like to start by saying we all know that selling is a team sport, but I would say nowadays that selling has become a complete enterprise sport. To accelerate their revenues, SaaS B2B companies need to synchronize all their processes and functions to enable their frontline team members to deliver extraordinary experiences and outcomes to their customers and prospects at every touch point. Being good enough is not good enough anymore. In a very competitive and ever-changing market, you need to excel at all facets of the game, more so now than ever before. That requires alignment across the enterprise on cultural values, strategies, tactics, and day-to-day operations with a focus on customer centricity. So, Keno, you're passionate about all of this. You're passionate about all aspects of sales performance in complex selling environments. We know that the key to success is to minimize the conversion leakages throughout the entire sales process. So how would you recommend structuring the sales cycle to increase that conversion rate and minimize that conversion leakage?
Yeah, it's a great question, Bernard. And the beautiful and the treacherous thing about this profession that we've chosen is how quickly it evolves. I remember when I first started in the business a long time ago, the purchasing dynamics were very different. It was very dictatorial. All you had to do was get high in the organization. Since that time, selling has really evolved. There is far more consensus driven decisions. In the old days, there was no such thing as SaaS. It was only on-prem perpetual licenses. So there was not a lot of need for security. There were not a lot of need for operations. You didn't have to get too involved with accounting, OpEx versus CapEx. All this has changed so much. Also, as a casual observer, I would say what resonates with buyers has also considerably evolved. It used to be that companies placed a very big emphasis on relationship building. This was a critical part of doing business, and it's still somewhat important, but as underscored in the famous book, The Challenger Sale, what we've learned is in the last 15 or so years, what prospects really value is people that challenge their conventional thinking and that know more about their business than they do. The evangelistic sale has really taken on a completely different meaning, where if you want to be successful converting your deals, progressing through the pipeline, it's critical that you're seen as a domain expert. You really have to know your stuff. You can't get by with a PowerPoint presentation anymore. You need to understand the competitive landscape. You need to be vigilant about understanding the business problems that your customer is going through. You have to demonstrate intellectual curiosity, and at the same time, you have to be able to convey that you can help them solve these problems, which is why you're asking them all these questions so that you could be vigilant about highlighting why they should spend a little bit more time with you. All of this has changed dramatically in the last 15 years. People talk about conversion rates, and I think they talk about them comprehensively and holistically. And I'm not suggesting that we don't do that. But if you're going to be an effective seller and an effective sales leader, you really have to basically look at an enterprise sales process in increments. Let me elaborate on what I mean by that. In the enterprise sales process that I've structured at the current company that I work at, we have a 10-stage sales process. Now, if I was looking at it end to end, it would spit out a certain number. We convert on the average 25% of our deals. That's what it would look like on the surface. But if I peeled it back and I broke it up into increments, stages 1 through 3, stages 3 through 6, stages 6 through 10, the data would be considerably different than that. And every sales organization, every seller is different and is good at different things. So to understand where you're struggling and where you lack help and where you as a sales leader need to be able to provide that help requires an introspection at those different stages to get a sense for, are we struggling with converting early on? Are we losing customers quickly, which is a reflection of a lack of domain expertise, perhaps, or an inability to connect with the customer? Or are we struggling as we progress in the later stages, which is a reflection of a lack of execution? That's a different set of problems. So
Yeah.
you really have to be much more surgical, both as a seller and being intellectually honest with yourself, and as a sales leader to know where are the gaps in your individual team members, not just the organization and not the overall end-to-end process. This is my high level thoughts.
Very, very true. And it's difficult to be good at what I would call all phases of the game, from the front end, which is about engagement, leading with insights, connecting, to the middle part, which is all about differentiating, to the later part, which is all about making sure you can close the deal. So, how do you hire a sales team to complement your expertise to ensure that altogether your team has the best capability to lead the prospect through the entire process end to end?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I would argue, Bernard, that the single most important aspect of my job is not delivering the numbers, which you might be surprised to hear. I believe the single most important aspect of our job as sales leaders is to hire, retain, and develop talent. If you do that well, everything else will take care of itself. It's no secret that the longer that a rep stays in a certain organization, the better that they get at the craft. They understand the product better, they understand their differentiation better, they understand the competitors better. So holding on to people in a society where we're bombarded, especially in the era of AI with shiny objects. There's a new and better deal, a new and better company around the corner like every 5 minutes. So I would say this, starting with talent. It is very difficult in this day and age with as much access to information like LinkedIn and systems that we have. It's very difficult to fall through the cracks. So, between what I see on LinkedIn and my ability to very quickly find somebody that knows the somebody that I'm interested in, I can usually get a pretty good sense of somebody before I've even had a conversation with them. Much like prospects in this day and age, by the time they show up in a sales cycle, they know as much or more about the product in the space than you do because doing research has become so much easier. Once you've got the right characteristics and an indicator of track record, metrics, references, these are tells. And if you see this consistently, it makes it a lot easier to make a good bet. That's where I start with. Now, here is where I will diverge with many of my sales counterparts. This is going to sound somewhat peculiar. I don't want reps to think too much. I don't want to rely on their discretion about what to do, how to attack an opportunity, what to position, and what to message. What I feel like we should be doing as sales leaders is defining what good looks like and looking for executors, people that can follow, for lack of a better word, a playbook. And I really hate that word, playbook, because it sounds very mechanical and it sounds very steps driven. I really prefer to think about playbooks as broad guidelines. In MedPick, for example, it says we need to get to the economic buyer. It doesn't say
Right.
how we get to the economic buyer. We could go there direct. We could get sponsorship from our champion or a prospective champion. We could get introduced through a partner. We could get introduced through a different counterpart in the organization, a board member, for example. There's an example of giving reps latitude to use their creative differences, their artistic liberties, but to still give some structure around what it is that we need to do and what we should be doing. So, between my forecast categories, between my sales stages, between my promotion criteria and the definition, I put the sellers in a position where they don't have to think too much about what the forecast category is. They don't have to levy their opinion, whether it should be in stretch, pipeline, upside, or commit. You give them the definitions. It either meets the definition or it doesn't, plain and simple. So you start with talent. Second, you put in place infrastructure. And third, you put in process that is fairly binary, that removes opinions and discretion and latitude out of the equation so we can all be singing from the same hymnal.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. We always say if you follow the right process, you'll get to the right outcome. So I think it's very important to have the right process in place. What would you say are the three key components you've been able to deploy successfully in your current position in your career that have made you successful?
Yeah. So I call it the three legs of the stool. And if we're talking about the right approach to pursue a deal, you really need three things. First and foremost, you need an enterprise sales process, one for a customer that is in the market, which is a differentiation sale, and one for a customer that is not in the market. They need to be provoked. They need to be educated. They need to be evangelized to. So we start with a sales process that outlines, depending on motion one or motion two, from the beginning until the very end, the ideal sequence of steps that gets us to the best outcome in the shortest period of time. Now, what we know invariably, it never goes that way. It never goes specifically the way that the process is outlined. But we need at least a starting place. We need governance that tells us what we should be doing. We need a North Star. When it doesn't go that right way, we need a qualification and a correction mechanism. I use in our process MedPick, which I didn't invent, but was invented at the very first software company I ever worked for, a company called Parametric Technology. That is a great mechanism for getting the wheels back on the wagon when your sales process has deviated from a winning strategy. And then the last thing that we need, especially for a complex account, is an account plan that is the roadmap and a living document for the opportunity that marries with it what I'm going to call the power base dynamics. There was a book, a famous book that was written called Power Based Selling by James Holden, where he does a fantastic job of outlining the fact that, especially in a complex sale, you're not really selling software, you're not really selling machinery, you're not selling whatever it is, fill in the blank. What you're really selling is an agenda. When I was a young buck and I was wet behind the ears, I thought that people did things that were in the best interest of the company. Well, as it turns out, they do things that's in their own best interest. So understanding each person in the buying process and what their agenda is critical to being able to mount a successful sales campaign. You'll have one account, one solution, but it really takes on many different forms depending on who it is that you're selling to. The
I agree.
CEO at the C level wants to buy enterprise shareholder value. The CFO wants to buy a strong ROI. Project manager wants to buy on time and under budget delivery. The architect wants to buy standards. The security guy wants to buy a solution that's not going to compromise the security of the organization, and so forth and so on. So you have to become fluent in the different languages of all these people, and you got to sell them what they want to buy. A very long answer to your question.
I think you're exactly right. We all know that all buying decisions are done by committee. So how do you identify all the members of the buying committee, and how do you win their hearts and minds? How do you personalize the messaging for them so that you can ultimately get positioned to win the evaluation?
Great question. Well, first, I would say read the book if you haven't. Read Power Based Selling because it does a far better job of answering the question that you just asked. But I will try, Bernard. So, first, we need to know their names and titles and a little bit of what we can learn about them from LinkedIn. Second, I would say don't message anybody until you've learned a little bit about what their agenda is. Information is critical. The best source of information within the account, besides what you can learn in the public domain through LinkedIn, 10Ks, 10Qs, and now AI, is from the people that have a strong vested interest in a favorable outcome. In power based vernacular, that would be your champion or your coach. They are people that are fighting for you. They are people that are giving you inside information, and they are the best source to share with you what people's different motivations are. So we got to start when we don't know anything by listing them out. Second, through asking a lot of questions and doing a lot of research and hopefully leveraging a coach and a champion, we know with their help what message needs to be crafted to what persona and what they're going to care about. Now, by the way, the reason that this thing is a living document, the account plan, is because those things are going to change over the course of the deal. It's a little bit of whack-a-mole. There's going to be people that pop up out of nowhere that we had no indication was important to the process. Some of them are going to be very much for us. Some of us are going to be very much against us. But if everybody in the team that's attacking the opportunity has access to this account plan, and it's updated every time we learn something new, it's the best vehicle that you possibly can have for being able to determine what we should sell to who and what should we not say to who, for example.
Very, very well said. Tell me more about negotiation, because very often people say, well, negotiation is something you do at the very end of the cycle.
Yes, this is something I feel very strongly about. Negotiation, because of very poor leadership and a lack of formal education in the art of selling, we failed categorically as sales leaders to really help sellers understand that negotiation is something that begins from the very first call in the account. We've been conditioned to think negotiation is involving price at the end of the process, and we're trading a few points for their willingness to get a deal done before the end of the quarter. That also happens, but you are negotiating from the very inception. And I've really taken exception my whole career to this dynamic and this notion of I'm a vendor, you're a buyer. That's very tactical. And if you play into that, if you see yourself that way, you'll never consider yourself on equal footing as your prospects. If you think about it, our most valuable commodity as sellers, Bernard, is what? It's time. Time is our most valuable commodity. We have to be very selective about where we spend that time. So, my philosophy as it pertains to negotiation is because we have to start somewhere and you want to be on the right foot to begin with. The first one is on me, whatever that is. The first one is on me. The first presentation, the first RFP response, the first white paper that I send you, whatever the investment is in the opportunity, you get one on me. But after that, anything else that you ask of me, I'm going to ask something of you that convinces me that this is a good use of my time, that we're sharing in the risk as partners. There's not this, I'm a vendor and I'm begging you for the business and I'll do whatever you want, Mr. Prospect. We got to crush that dynamic. No, what I have is valuable. It is my job to help you see that it's valuable. Once you recognize that it's valuable, or you at least are convinced that it's worth spending some more time to investigate its value and its viability, we got a horse trade. I'll do some more things for you that serve that agenda, that will confirm that the software will do what we say it will do. But you in turn have to lower my risk and show me that this is a worthwhile pursuit. So, what are some things that I can ask? I can ask you to sponsor me to the economic buyer. I can ask that we gain agreement on what the success criteria is for the formal evaluation. You want me to set you up with one of my references? Okay, you have to agree to be a reference for me if you guys end up buying the software, whatever it is. The point is, it starts from the very inception once you make the initial investment. And let me tell you, it's just like a relationship, and there are bad relationships out there. A bad relationship is where I give, give, you take, and you don't reciprocate. That's not a good relationship. We have to break that dynamically.
I totally agree. It's really important to actually give value incrementally to the buying team, and in exchange for that, get incremental commitment from the buying team. So at every step of the game, isn't it a value equation where you give incremental value and you get incremental commitment that leads you to more and more value, more and more commitments from the buying team, which ultimately gets you in a position to win the deal. As you pointed out, at every stage, every time you give a little bit of value to the buying team by way of an assessment, a demo, some insights, you need to expect and ask for incremental commitment. In that light, how do you position value selling, and when do you position value selling in your sales methodology?
Yeah. So the answer to your question is rooted in the business case. And here's something that a lot of reps don't understand. That the worst thing you can do is head into a negotiation where the value of whatever it is that you're selling is being determined arbitrarily by the customer. And when I say arbitrarily, they might be assigning a value to whatever it is that you're asking them to buy, in this case, software, based on their experience, based on what a competitor provided them as a price, based on what budget they may have or not have. Those are bad things to anchor on. We don't want that to become the basis for the value determination. We got to lead the witness. We want to help them ascribe what the value is. And the way that we do that is through a business case, is through an ROI. That's where the real negotiation begins. Let me elaborate on that for a moment. As a general rule of thumb, specs will spend for software, enterprise software, 25% of the mutually agreed to value of the software. So if I can convince you through a discovery, an effective demo, through references, through some kind of a POC or a validation event, and all the other things that we do to prove value, if I can convince you that the software will save you $1 million a year or will make you an incremental $1 million a year, as a general rule of thumb, you will give me 25% of that, or in this case, $250,000. So where you want to negotiate, where you want to become very well versed in the art of negotiation is in arguing what that value is to the end customer. You got to think comprehensively. Again, we don't want them to make the determination. Oh, I think it's worth $1 million, therefore I'll pay you 250,000.
Right.
If I would have asked a few more questions, if I would have said, well, have you considered this? Or have you considered that? Or what about this particular area? Oh, how are you doing that today? Now, those questions, I'm able to get you to see that it's actually worth $1.5 million to you. My deal just went up just by that. And we haven't even started negotiating price yet. We haven't even started negotiating. We're negotiating the ROI. We're negotiating the business case. I think that is what's lost on reps in this day and age. A failure to recognize the criticality of anchoring the value of whatever it is that you're selling on the business case and becoming an expert at negotiating the business case and making sure that it is comprehensive, that it takes into account all factors that could benefit the customer du jour. That's what you want to do before you ever get thrown over to the wolves in procurement. Because if you've negotiated that business case, going into the final business case, you might still end up shaving a couple of points to get the deal done, but you've anchored them on a number that is X what it would have been if you had left it to them to make the determination of what the value is.
No, I think that's very, very well said. And Keno, you and I could talk about this for hours. We will, however, draw to a close for the audience today. So, if I may start recapping what we talked about, you started by explaining that the selling environment and the buying environments have totally changed over the last 5 to 10 years. The old selling skills have to evolve, and clearly that's what you're looking at in the talent that you hire. You talked about three major components: talent, infrastructure, and process that are required to make sure that you can successfully build a sales team that will meet and exceed its obligations in terms of bookings and revenues. The importance of hiring the right talent in the team, give them the right infrastructure, give them the right process so that the process leads to successful outcomes over time. You talked about the three key components that you've deployed successfully: a sales process by sales motion, a qualification mechanism, in your case, MedPick, and the power-based selling approach with an account plan that becomes a standard of the truth of the sales motion for that particular opportunity. We talked about the role of negotiation, starting early and using it throughout the entire sales cycle to get to the right outcome. We talked about the role of value selling as being key on the front end to negotiate the value of the business case, to anchor the value of the deal. Before I give it back to you to close, one more question to you. What have you seen as the role of AI in your sales leadership role? How do you use AI today to actually help you succeed in winning deals?
Well, it's evolving so fast, Bernard. So I'll answer your question, and the answer will probably be different 2 weeks from now, as I've never seen anything in my life like AI. Where we use it primarily in our sales motion is in putting together complex arguments supported by complex visualizations that illustrate with pictures and words what the potential value of the solution may be. So I'll give you some examples. We will prompt AI with pointing it at our website and our internal documents and our value that we believe that we have through our SharePoint, through our business case tools, through case studies. We basically will point it at all the things that we do and then we do well, in addition to what's in the public domain. Then we will say something like, I'm just going to make up an account, XYZ account. What does XYZ account's current infrastructure cloud environment look like? Then we'll say, create a visualization and bulletized value points about what value we would offer XYZ company based on what you've uncovered about their existing environment, and create a reference architecture high level diagram that show how our components would connect with theirs. As this is not going to be any secret to anybody, the trick with AI is in how well you're able to prompt it, right? The more specific you can prompt it, the higher the quality of the output that you get. We have become very good at prompting AI with that kind of a talk track. Help me figure out how I could help this particular company with what you know about our solutions. That's at a very high level. And what it has been able to produce in terms of a narrative and diagrams and pictures is something that would have ordinarily taken us months.
I think that's fantastic. The ability to actually prompt an AI tool to create a visualization, a blueprint, a reference architecture that will meet the needs of a customer so that you can effectively solve their problems with a solution that you can enable, I think is absolutely fantastic. So thanks for sharing that. And to close the podcast today, Keno, I'd like to leave you with the last word and your thoughts on the takeaway, the leave behind for the audience today. What would you like the audience to take away from this podcast today?
I'll leave you with this parting thought, Bernard, for everybody, actually. As the old adage goes, find something that you love doing and you'll never work a day in your life. I see a lot of reps in this business that are enamored with the ability to make money. And sales, if you're good at it, can be very rewarding financially as well as professionally. But I see there's a lot of people that are in it just for the money, and their lack of passion around it shows. You will never be a great or an exceptional seller if you're not committed to the cause, if you don't love what you do. So, my guidance for all of us, do something that you love doing, and if you don't love sales, be intellectually honest with yourself and go do something else. Go do something that you love, because in life, there's financial success, but there's being content and being happy with what you do. And the worst scenario you can be in is when those two are at odds with each other, where you're making money, you can't really afford to leave it, but you're miserable. Make a decision to
Yeah.
get out of the game before it gets to that point if you're not in love with this crazy, dysfunctional, wonderful occupation of ours. I guess that's all I would say.
What a great lead behind. Thank you so much, Keno, for sharing your thoughts and insights today. I'm sure we'll talk soon. Thanks again.
Nice to see you.